Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Intelligence Podcast. Once again, our latest episode features a couple of really interesting people who I think you'd like to see. First of all, I'm Adam Riggio. I am the host, unfortunately for all of you. And with me here is Dean Boukydis, an education professional and business person with hundreds upon thousands of years of experience in the topics that we're going to be talking about today, along with a wide variety of other topics in the education field. And with me also is Youssef Youssef, a professor and also with many, many years of experience. More importantly, he is the president of CIMMO, the
Chartered Institute of Marketing Management of Ontario.
You said it right. The Chartered Institute of Marketing Management of Ontario. I will get this name correct all at once at one point without having to have it written down in front of me. Long names. Anyway, we today, this episode of New Intelligence, we're exploring the role of artificial intelligence in education. And one of the most important things we're doing with this is busting a lot of myths and probing into the truth of how AI actually will be sensibly applied in the field of education today, and how that affects some of the wider issues that affect post-secondary education in Canada, which is where we are based, but also in North America more widely, and in the world in general, and the industrialized and technologized world. So small topics as usual. But yeah, one of the first things that I really want to ask about right now, and to get everyone started on talking about, is what are some of the things that you have heard and that the fears in particular that you guys have come across about the role of artificial intelligence in post-secondary education? How is it being used, and what are people afraid of about its uses first and foremost? Because there are a few things we need to talk about in terms of false fears, and then there's real fears and substantiated fears. So, Youssef, what are some of those fears?
Well, thank you, Adam and Dean. It's nice to meet you. So there are many fears, I guess, and these many fears have origin in the fact that most people do not understand how the technology is working, and still attached to the old-fashioned model of education that has created. And I think in the pre-industrial era, where we were used to a certain way of things and putting things in boxes, and then the competencies and skills were put in ways that technology was not aiding them. Now that technology is not evolved, so people are afraid of technology. And one of the fears that I guess, and I can see why people would be fearing, especially in the higher education system, is that first from professors, that their fear of being replaced by technology. And I think that this fear has ground because technology is being able now not only to deliver personalized content and cater to specific way of learning that the students would be, learning through, but also the level of content or the access to content that we otherwise don't have. We live in a specialized world where we're not multidisciplinary by any stretch of imagination, and that this is one fear. The other fear is that it comes to the cognitive capacity of our students. So sometimes the faculty are concerned about outsourcing some of these cognitive tasks that, like critical thinking or many other soft skills that we mentioned here, communication skills, written skills, where ChatGPT is leveling the playing field. And this is another fear that some people are facing. And then the third fear is about the industry in general. What's going to happen to these institutions, pachydermic institutions that do not respond to the market needs, to your point, Dean. And this is, and in my opinion, it is transformational change that will transform the industry of higher education. And then this structure that is feeding a lot of big salaries will cease to exist, in my opinion, in the near future. I'm talking in my perspective in 10 years, where those administrative works will be relegated to technology, and technology will be taking over teaching and learning, and we will be much more focused on competency and skill-based learning. So I see major transformation, fears that have ground because things are happening, But what I see too, that people do not understand what's going on around them and still attached to old-fashioned system, whether in teaching and learning or administration.
Yeah. Because I mean, I personally have no real fear regarding the prospect of, like, say, administrational shrinkage, right? If anything, the last 20 years of my career in the post-secondary sector has seen a lot of programs suffer from too much administrative bloat, if anything. So what I'm interested in kind of hearing, from both of you really as well, is what is it about AI? How will it be used in such a way that will make the bloated administration of so many post-secondary institutions, will make that actually disappear, or at least become so redundant that most post-secondary institutions, board of governors or other decision makers will look at some of these administrative positions and be like, you are now even more obviously useless than you were at the beginning. And I can no longer deny this. What will exactly happen? What will it do?
I think it's going to do the same thing that it's doing, disrupting in many other industries. We've had conversations about this where, AI and current forms of AI are rocking the legal community, where we no longer need 30% of our lawyers to write contracts anymore because the machines can do this just fine. They can write contracts. What it can't seem to replace are the negotiations or the courtroom lawyers, right? So what's happened, I think, in post-secondary, we became complacent. In a very big way, and we just delivered content, and we took it the easy way out, and we used technology as a labor-saving device. We put multiple choice questions onto a test, and we had a machine mark it for us. There was no assessment and evaluation on that. So the industry got lazy and got complacent. AI's come up, and it's shaken up and what we should have been doing all along, and we're still reacting to that right now. So I'm excited about AI coming in as a competitor. I think that's really important. Hopefully, it's going to bring back education to analysis, evaluation, and creation. That the machines don't do well. And hopefully, academia is going to refocus on that, refocus on the classroom and how that works.
Yeah. If I can get back to the question of fear, and I guess this is a question of the implementation of AI software.
The fear is the change. The fear is fear in general.
As always.
Change.
Oh yeah, as always.
Right?
Change.
Yeah. This is the fundamental fear. We got complacent. This has come in and rocked our boat.
Yeah. The only fear that survives when you say you bracket, take the fear of change, throw it out, right? The only fear to me that survives is fear of misapplication, or rather fear of a too wide application. Thinking that, and I think this is a problem where decision makers about the implementation of AI don't necessarily know that much about the technological limits of AI, right? Like what you've said, the fact that a lot of the creative human labor of education work can't really be replaced by AI. But there is the perception among many decision makers that it can, and that even after some of the mediocre results might be seen, the cost savings and the fact that some of those decision makers might not necessarily have been able to tell good content from bad content in the first place, right? And then the question becomes, will this be misapplied to bring down the quality of education further?
Well, if I weigh in, first of all, I think the creative work has been impacted hugely by artificial intelligence. It depending where do you see that from, but my perspective is, as being professor of the marketing discipline, I see that there is really a huge implication in terms of the generation, content generation, the creation of videos, the perfection or creation of even pictures and images based on what you want to be created, independently of our discussions about intellectual property here. So the creative part is being impacted. The copywriting part is being impacted. What we need to question here is how long is that, or how far that can be. And as professors and educators, we need to reflect on the ethicality of this approach, number one, and then you're right about the quality of these outcomes. And I see that outsourcing this, and one of the fears that you're saying, okay, what my students need to be good at going to the industry and what industry wants them to be good at. And from that standpoint, I see artificial intelligence as one more tool, if we use it properly, to the extent that our students will be focused much more in developing their critical thinking capacity or capabilities, and their innovative and creative capabilities, not in the creation part of it, but making the judgment that you mentioned here, Adam. So this is my thing. Quality will be a huge issue, and then I would like to say something later about how I do see the future of higher education. How do I see this industry unfolding?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, this is literally the brand of this show is the future and futurism. So that's definitely a conversation we need to have. How I want to get there, I want to plot our way there a little bit, because one thing that really caught my eye in what you said, the proper use, using it properly. What is the proper use? Not how the, cost saving at all cost business person will use it. We see that already in all the mediocre AI products that we see. I find new examples every week in my everyday news reading that I bring to my own students as an educator, and that I just sort of keep in the bank as like ridiculous things that I see of the misuse of this. But what is the proper use of AI?
That's a really good question. And if I can use an analogy, it's like all of us in post-secondary can drive a car. So I'll bring a Lamborghini Countach into the road here, into the parking lot here, and say, okay, everybody take an individual turn. That car can go from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 2 seconds. How many of us can drive it? Right? Very few of us. We can drive the car, but we can't maximize what it is. So I use that as an analogy to us as an institution and teachers using chat. We've seen chat. We go on and we play with it. We play with large language models. We play with this stuff. We play with artificial intelligence, but we don't understand what drives it or how to drive it well. I have yet to see an institution, all right, collaborate with the creators to say, show us how to drive this Lamborghini.
Yeah.
All right, and maximize its use to its efficiency. We can't do that yet. I hear teachers, we've been to webinars where they're saying, we're using it, it's writing my lesson plan. Are they even analyzing the lesson plan to see what's coming out of it? They're not. They're using it to sound, it's the cool thing to do.
Yeah. Because I mean, okay, so this is one of the examples that I was thinking of. I'm going to bring this up because it's a really funny example. And this is the news from just 3 days ago as far as our recording date goes. So Praz from the Fujis could be going to prison, and he has applied for a new trial. And the charges are very complicated, and I'm not going to get into it here. It basically involves funneling money to very, very sketchy business people in other countries in the other side of the Pacific, and having a few too close connections with the Chinese government not properly registered while he was doing so. But the interesting thing is he has applied for a new trial because he discovered that his lawyer was also working for an AI company, and he went on several media appearances after the trial, bragging about how useful the AI system was in writing the materials for the trial, right? So not just the ordinary things like contracts and application materials, the sort of more cookie cutter lawyer documents, legal documents that you need to have, but he also had the AI write the closing argument. And when Praz and his new lawyers analyzed this closing argument, it was filled with factual errors, so he alleges, filled with factual errors, all kinds of misshaped arguments, statements that conflated several of the charges and circumstances and situations together, and even at some points, apparently, so he says, admitting to his guilt. And the defense lawyer did not bother editing this or checking this or running through what was generated at all, but instead simply took what the AI generated, or so is alleged in this application for a new trial, and simply read it as is before the courts as the closing statement. So one of the things we've been talking about is the necessity of, after you have an AI-generated text or an AI-generated lesson plan or something like that, there must then be that human element of looking at it and saying, what has this machine produced? Have there been any errors? There seems to me to be a presumption that AI means errorlessness. So where might the errors come from, and how do we anticipate them?
Well, I'm very active in this area. I mean, my area in marketing is just, my expertise is in marketing technologies, and I'm an engineer myself, so by trade, electronic engineer. So I cannot be rather than pro technology in the sense that when it comes to helping and aiding humanity, we need to put things into perspective. Yes, this lazy lawyer did not use, and then this is, I'm sorry, I mean, I don't mean to offend
This
the lawyer.
allegedly lazy lawyer did not.
Yeah, because I think at this stage of the conversation about AI, we are at the beginning of a new era. And of course, the technology is not well developed or evolved or had no access or optimized to address these specific needs for the lawyers, for example. But we know for a fact that many decisions in the financial market, good decisions, have been made and supported by artificial intelligence. Indeed, the Wall Street is full of these algorithms, or complex algorithms with technology of networking technologies at speed, and so that connects to Wall Street. So I believe the issue is not how technology will get, or how fast technology will get to get these verdicts, or the preparation for the trial right. I think what would be the role of humans in after this happens, and whether if we have these capabilities to look at this and say, well, that makes sense or does not make sense. And this is where our role as educators lies, in my opinion. But it's a very difficult task, because we are now in a very, what we call general artificial intelligence era, where artificial intelligence can barely handle human tasks. But we're moving towards much more capacity in terms of artificial intelligence, and this is what we call superintelligence, which will be 200,000 times maybe our capacity in reasoning or having access to the volumes of information that are out there. Plus, we are in very close, maybe in 15 years, hopefully 20 years, to the quantum technology that will be boosting by thousands or hundreds of thousands of times the current supercomputing technologies that we have available. So I think it's not the technology itself, it's how can we build capacity using this technology to create the critical thinking, and what will be our roles or the professional roles that we are looking after as educators to see what the industry is looking for. Because I'm sure that optimization is something, efficiency is something as an industry. I want to save money, and I can invest in technology working 24/7, and I don't want to pay people. They have no unions, they don't complain, and then they don't have access to volumes of data that are needed to decide on matters. So whether in the legal field or the finance or marketing, or we are facing major challenge. Nobody knows the end game of this, I guess, based on what I've read. But I think we need to think fast, not slow about this, because there's a lot in the plate rather than only, as it goes back to our role as educators, and the role of institutions of education as well.
Well said. And I'd like to add to that, and I agree with everything you said. We have a tendency sometimes to not step back and learn from history.
Yeah.
So AI 1.0, we've been using it for 15 years. Okay, social media, everything along this line, and we know how that turned out. Yeah. Right? It was created to connect the world. It was created for 2 or 3 really great things, allowed individuals to be able to have their say and do certain things. But what it also did was create teenage suicide and depression. It's shaken democracies around the world. We now have, so there's all of these huge negatives. Deep fake and fake, which is even getting on. So we've seen this happen when we hear the pluses, and that's what business concentrated on. We now know what happens with all these negatives that are massive. With AI 2.0, which is the large language models in this, to your point, are we prepared? Are we stepping back enough to say, can we take the lessons we've learned with social media and apply it to large language models? And how do we mitigate these risks, to your point? And we're not doing that because right now, big tech is doing this fabulous marketing campaign on why we must use it. And everybody doesn't want to look unprepared. And so they're saying, yes, we'll adopt, just like we did with this. We're not learning from history. And this is where education needs to take a step back. Possibly government has to take a step back and say, how do we look at these changes properly and take a long, this is a tool. How do we use this tool effectively?
Of course, I agree.
And we're not doing that right now. And that's one of the biggest risks I see, not removing of jobs. What will happen, right? We know how powerful language is. It's caused wars over millennia. It's caused everything else. These large language models can be incredibly dangerous. And to your point on deep fake, and not now knowing what we can see, anything we see online, is it actually real? There's a huge negative. What are we doing to mitigate that? Those are the risks.
I mean, what would the critical approach to this look like? I mean, this is what I'm trying to really get into here. Cut away the analogies, cut away the structures, and be like, what are the powers that artificial intelligence has? And how do we, as critically thinking individuals, how do we educate ourselves to control those powers, right? What is that? What do we do with ourselves and
Adam,
our thoughts?
you mentioned the word that is a puzzle for all of us in education: control. Control. Where is the control? Is that in the hands of the government, the big techs, or us? For me, as an educator, I feel that we lost control a long time ago, and the government as well. It's at the hand of the big techs. And to your point, I mean, we do not learn from history, and clearly, social media has had given us great lessons that can be learned, and we can optimize those things. My concern is, and I agree with everything you said too, is that what would be the end game of this? Where we are going to head? I mean, what is the future of the humanity in general? And I'm not being pessimistic. I'm very optimistic, actually. But what kind of society would you like to have, given all of these conversations that are happening around artificial intelligence, the hype? Everybody is excited. I have international students that are very much excited about artificial intelligence. Why? Because it levels the playing field. Language is not a problem for them anymore. Their essays can be written by artificial intelligence. And we have been using this for some time, as mentioned by Dean. The idea of, as humans, how are we looking forward to be as a society is the critical question. And I look at this, there are some philosophical approaches to this. I mean, the late philosopher Sigmund Bauman, he talks a lot about the blurry lines between reality and the liquidity or liquid society, right? And I see the liquidity very clearly now between the individual me and the virtual me that are blurred, and now we are confused, and our brains are being rewired because of the fake news, the deep fakes, the fake reality that has been created. So we are becoming cognitively different beings. And then this interference in our cognitive ability to discern things would interfere in the future, not only education, and the society at large.
Well said. I agree with you 100%. And Tristan Harris put it best to me. Okay, Center for Humane Technology. I think he does a great job. I use him in my ethics lectures all the time. Where he talked about humans have a Paleolithic brain. We have medieval institutions governing our Paleolithic brains, and yet we have godlike technology going at a speed that far outstrips anything we can do. If we don't put some control over this, to your point, at some time in here, we're going to be in trouble because we still have this Paleolithic brain.
Yeah.
So how do we cope with deep fake? How do we cope with when we can no longer believe what we see or hear? Yeah. How do we go about discerning this? And that may be the biggest challenge that we have to teach in a classroom, is bringing it back to, okay, analysis, evaluation, and creation of concept. Use the tools that are there. They're great tools. They're saving an awful lot of time. Learn how to analyze this. We've gotten away from that as educators. We need to come back to that. That even means we have to train some of our teachers in how to do this because they're products of that system.
Yeah, the old system.
The old system.
Yeah.
The complacent system.
That is still running.
Yeah.
It still constitutes the rules that a lot of us who work in education kind of have to follow. You know, like we look at academic integrity models that say are mandatory for our students to take, and the checklists of what they run through are the kind of things that are more suitable to what people were dealing with in the economy and the technology of the 1960s and 70s, rather than the much more versatile tools of composition, really, that we're dealing with now. So, like, I guess that's the next thing I really want to ask you guys about, which is, as educators, what does that look like? What are the kind of objectives we might have to put into our educational methods to give our students the practical knowledge to use AI critically, not just for their work in the school, but like out there and working with things and working with companies and working with people that themselves might want to overuse AI for the sake of a little bit of saving on their short-term bottom lines.
Like, Adam, I have bad news.
Shit.
I have bad news.
I hate that one.
Damn it.
You know, I think the system as it is right now, it will not stand for longer. The education system we're talking about. Our approach to classroom needs to change. And our judgments of academic integrity as well. I mean, when we look at academic integrity and we ask students not to plagiarize, I mean, I get it. And this is the old-fashioned way to approach the ethics of dealing with academic misconduct. Now, when it comes for the current situation, where the proper system is designed based on what we define as an academic misconduct, how do we deal with the outcomes? And even though we have artificial intelligence systems that have some capabilities in judging whether artificial intelligence has been widely used or not. So and now we are asking the students to cite OpenAI or Brad or whatever the technology that they are using. So I think the system, the way it is, to your point, Dean, I mean, from preparation to these faculty on how to deal with this new reality, to help them to be trained on these tools and understand how do they work so they can use it to maximize the student learning and their critical learning capabilities, and also to redefine what academic misconduct would mean. Because I think we've lost this kind of conversation long time ago with Google. Then we have the rephrasing mechanisms that are being used for a long time. And this is, again, Dean, so you mentioned that artificial intelligence. And we need to revisit this conversation. It's not as usual anymore. And I would like to say that our system will be transformed into something else that will have no classrooms anymore. And that's my perception. I foresee in 25 years, hopefully before that, the end of university as it is, the end of colleges as they are, and then we will be transformed into utopian society where knowledge and skills and competencies will be at play. And then the measurement, or how do we assess these capabilities, will be completely different from what we do right now. How do we assess? How do we evaluate learning? How do we deliver learning? I see the higher education, or the education system, much more looking like not our current healthcare system, but basically based on, a competency specialists that will be assessing your needs, and then they will prescribe for you the recipe to go and be bought on any of these knowledge pharmacies that have their modules right there, like Coursera or Humber or Udacity or EDX or many others that are available. And then you come back and certify. The question is, what is the quality and outcomes of these products? And then there we need a quality assessment. So I'm sorry about that, but I mean, this is how I see the future unfolding.
I wouldn't be sorry about that. I agree with you. I think part of, to the point of complacency, right? We allowed ourselves to get lulled into a place of complacency as an industry, post-secondary for sure. And that's part of the problem. It was part of the public education system of coming out of the industrialized era, taking them off the farm. And we haven't really changed since then. Not really. And now we're at a stage, like you say, with plagiarism and academic integrity, which We talk about it, but we don't do it. We don't design our classrooms for separating this, so none of that really happens to any extent. It could if we were serious about it, and that's something we need to do. But I also agree with you. Today, it doesn't matter where you get the information. I teach, and my team now teaches with the idea that use and cite whatever tools you want. My questions will come to you as, can you own the content you just told me?
Yeah.
Can you explain to me that you fully understand it and convince me you can? Even if you say, I use the large language models and I noticed some issues, and this is what I adapted. That's what we want our learners to use today. To your point, we're all learners.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where the role is in the system. And that's what we need to encourage and develop. That also gets rid of the toxicity in learning, which we have today in post-secondary education, which I'm going to catch you cheating. They're going to do what they can to cheat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And who wants to work in a toxic work environment?
Yeah.
So why are we doing that at a college level?
Yeah. Agreed.
One of the things that I find, frustrating is when someone's solution to somebody using a GPT to write a paper is, well, now just cite the GPT. And it's like that alone is not nearly enough to make up for the things that you are not doing if you are relying on that artificial intelligence to produce for you, right? And I think that's where a lot of the mistake of AI use really comes from. It's mistaking the ability to create content according to orders and demands for the actual production of meaningful statements and meaningful content, right? Going back to this case of the entirely alleged mistakes in this trial of the defense lawyer.
How do we know you were going there?
Yeah,
exactly.
of the defense lawyer who writes the closing argument, but does not read the closing argument until he delivers it and does not check it and doesn't see the errors and the mistakes and the different priorities, right? What do we do in the classroom, or even if it's just not a real classroom, but what do we as education professionals do in training our students to use AI creation well enough that what they produce will do what they want the produced thing to do? How do we unite that kind of real action with what the AI system produces?
I would go to the stage that it's the basic understanding that AI is not the end product. AI is part of the process. And it's your ability to analyze and evaluate what you saw, to your point, where the lawyer made that mistake thinking it was an end product. I see our professors doing the same thing. They'll have AI write their lesson plan. All they'll have, or a student will do it as the end product. It's not. What it did is a great labor-saving device to gather what's online historically. We'll talk later about biases that are there. We'll talk later, about hallucination later as well. How do they diagnose that? We need to get into that. We need to start training faculty to understand how to use this system, and they don't know.
Yeah. And not only train them, equip them with technology. Exactly. I see a lot, what I regret to see is that we are going through the same model that the industry is going through, which is optimization and cost reduce and focus on financial issues. Universities and higher education systems used to be driving industry instead. Now we're being driven by industry. There's nothing wrong with that as far as we understand our role, and then we give the industry the role that they need from us. And this is not happening. We are competing with the industry. We are competing amongst ourselves. We are looking after this efficiency model, and we're putting our faculty in not only in time schedule, but under stress to deliver. And I can see why. Well, one of the lawyer, for example, it's what comes to my mind was that a pressure on him to deliver on that whatever he was required for, and then yes, he optimized his resources, and he thought that artificial intelligence would do so for him. That's lack of understanding. He was not trained. But how can we help our faculty, our colleagues in the higher education system, not only to understand how to use it, but also to be trained on technology? And we know that we have resistance amongst some fellows that they don't want to use it. And how can we start, to your point, Dean? I mean, how can we make it a starting point, not the end point of this conversation about teaching and learning?
I think we have to start with coming back to what's the purpose of public education, post-secondary education to begin with.
Yeah.
We've lost sight of that.
Yeah.
Is it a sales-driven organization today? What is its purpose?
It is.
And to your point, exactly. And I think as long as we haven't made that clear, the ideas that have been tabled here in terms of getting rid of classrooms, which is a great idea, coming back to apprenticeships, coming back to show me how you can do what you need to do in the workplace today doesn't need to be kept in a classroom. Asking Socratic questions, right? I mean, we know we have the tools. History has taught us this stuff.
Yeah.
And as humans, it's the same Paleolithic brain we're using. Yeah. Okay? But how do we optimize this? We've lost sight of what our purpose is. We need to bring it back. And we've seen this bright, shiny thing called large language model, and it's really cool. But why will we use it, and in what application? We need to have the internal discipline to say, let's really analyze this well and see in which disciplines it applies best. We're not doing that.
No, and we're not investing in philosophy either. I mean, you're going to the Socratic point, right? I mean, how do we build critical thinking if we teach the students the how and why is just hanging in somewhere? I think, and this is one of the issues that I mentioned, and to your point, I agree 100%. How do we make them critical thinkers? And everybody's looking at the Bloom, typology one, and then we need to review that. That was designed for like the old-fashioned systems, and now we have students with rewired brain, short, attention span, and maybe 80% of them diagnosed with ADHD. So how do we deal with this situation? How are we? I'm not an education specialist, but I mean, we need to revisit all of these issues in the light of not only making faculty ready, but also understanding the needs of these students and not emulating what the industry is doing. I mean, putting faculty under pressure and making them work hard to deliver and then to shrink, the investment on them so the outcomes would be okay. So the Ministry of Education is happy. What kind of outcomes are we looking for? So is it a sales-like organizations, or we're looking for like educated citizens that can make decisions and use AI as a tool, not as an end? Can
contribute to society and build an equitable society. Yeah, exactly. And we have to get rid of the bureaucratic thinking around it. And that's one of the things that's happened. It's about maintaining status quo rather than leading through change.
Yeah.
And that's what we don't do well. And we need to, as an industry, get back to. And I think the roots are there. And there's a lot of colleagues I work with in the classroom that are happy to do it, but they need some help getting there because they're products of the older system, the complacent system that took them through the motions. They're content experts.
And they're assessed on these bases too. Are your customers happy with you? And what do you make to make them happy about you?
Who's the customer?
Yeah, the customer. They ask them as students.
Yeah, is the customer the student or industry?
I think the customer is the industry. This is something that I have no doubt about it. But the colleges, when they assess a university, when they assess the faculty, they ask the students if they are happy about the learning with them. And then you have a trade-off here. So if I'm nice to you, you give me good rating and go to rate my professor and do something nice about me. So I will be hired and freshly maintained. So we have a couple of things that we need to review. And then artificial intelligence may come and say, you know what, we don't need you as a faculty. You can assess their learning. We can deliver the learning based on them, and we can do whatever needed be.
Probably better if you're just lecturing from a textbook, not connected to anything that is current. The challenges, as you say, being able to do that, preparing them for what's coming, which is a different way of thinking rather than standardized, industrialized. I'm teaching you a certain level of literacy, a certain level of this, but with the pace of change accelerating, the gap now between what industry wants and what we're delivering, the chasm is bigger than the Grand Canyon.
We lost our importance as an education institution a long time ago, I guess.
And AI is actually highlighting that really well, which is a good thing.
It will definitely spark some kind of change and movement forward, I guess I could say, in that regard. The thing that again bugs me, and what I'd like to get more of your sort of input on here, is this issue of like, what is the best application of an AI system? Because it's we get to this point. Let me try if I can really settle on this question, because all the things you've had to say are incredibly interesting, and there's a core that I think is still being unaddressed, which is there is a tendency, and it's a really unfortunate tendency in industry, that exists alongside the virtues of industry, that says, how can we build sustainable business models and educational systems using this new technology and getting the kind of talent we want for our companies and our endeavors, right, who can use this technology properly. But then there's also the impulse of simply using the technology to maximize returns as quickly as possible, right? Like you said, when an instructor is so complacent in their work that the only thing they really contribute, aside from the content that they might have been given by an administration, is the fact that they are up in front of people in a classroom or on a screen delivering the content, right? There are already AI newsreaders on TV channels that do the same thing. And yes, they have humans working for them. Yes, they have fact checkers and sort of critical folks on the support team making sure that everything comes out properly. But if all we're doing as teachers is delivering prearranged information, then where is the value added as an education system? Where does that real material value come from? And what more do we need to do to create that real material value in an AI-enabled context?
Well, in the AI-enabled context, first, we need to redefine what does that mean. We were talking about systemic approach. I mean, what does that mean? Nobody has figured out right now. I am trying to innovate in my classroom. I brought in artificial intelligence. I brought ChatGPT based on conversation with industry partners that I have. And she said, what would be the role of artificial intelligence in my class? I purchased the technology. I paid for it. I had no support. I mean, not that the colleges are not supporting, but the colleges don't know what to do yet, because you have the regulations. We are regulated industry. So the ministry has its own regulations. The colleges and universities, they have their own universes and models that they need to navigate. We are lost between polytechnic identity or teaching a trade-based system, or a research and applied research, and we confuse research with applied research with everything. We did not decide where to go, and amidst of all of this, we have the transformational thing of technology that's coming our way. I see education serving the society as an ecosystem, and the industry is part of that. Yeah. But it's not limited to it. For some time, we lost this conversation. What we do is just we're much more focused on delivering to the industry. We forgot about the citizens' formation, and this is something that is very relevant. The industry is important, and that's where I see polytechnic education help industry to develop, and then we serve them with what they need in terms of competency and skills. But at the same time, university, you cannot lose from your side also your role as forming citizens and catering to the society as a whole. They are, for example, terminating courses in philosophy, in social sciences, because they are not lucrative anymore. We're looking at from this efficiency standpoint all the way, and the society is losing with that. Now, how the new system in the lights of artificial intelligence as a tool, again, would work, nobody knows. And how can we design the system to optimize the use of technology as a tool to cater to these needs of the society from one side, the industry from the other side, is a critical question, a $1 million question that we need to answer. I'm not sure.
No, that's really well said, and I'm totally on board with that. I think what we need to do in our classrooms is do this critical analysis ourselves as well. We have to step back. Like, one of the things I like to talk about is back to artificial 1.0. What was the purpose of social media? Yeah. And I ask these questions in class, and it's really interesting when I get back, and we eventually distill it down to it was to sell screen time.
Yeah.
Okay, and understand that that's what drove it all along. All the rest of this stuff is window dressing to sell a business model that was about screen time and advertising. Okay, and that's what the driver was. One of the questions I'm now asking the students is, knowing this, that's what drove that, what is the driver behind AI 2.0?
Yeah.
What is the driver behind it? When we can figure out what that is with industry, we can now figure out how to mitigate that and move forward. Questions I ask our students are questions like, okay, so AI and chat continues to go on. We now have these deep fakes where we cannot believe anything we read or see online. What are the opportunities with that going forward in business? The students are loving those conversations. So education isn't going to teach what we do. Where is it going? Yeah. Knowing this is what it is, understanding sociology, anthropology, psychology, zoology, putting it all together, all the ologies, all right? Knowing how our brain functions, how will we do this going forward? That's what we're leaving out of the system, right? We're training to a current rather than let's get you thinking critically and analyzing of what will come from this.
You mentioned the Center for Humane Technology, Tristan, and then lately what they said is just disturbing. I mean, I watched the interference in our thoughts. I mean, the technology is being able, it's just, I mean, they understand our brain reaction to things, and that is concerning. And then to bring it back to your classes, and I teach ethics too. I mean, how can we revisit this ethical framework and this conversation around? Because we are living in times that not only education is under question, but a society as a whole, the way we think, the way we react to things, our brain is being rewired, based on this reality that we're seeing, and then the blurry reality between or lines that are not existent anymore, the liquidity between virtual me, virtual me, real me. God knows where I am in this.
We won't even talk the metaverse.
The metaverse has objectives there, right?
Oh yeah.
So I mean, this liquidity that is being created. As educators, I see we have obligations, Adam, and my good friend Dean. I'm happy to call you friend. So it's just, what is our role as educators in the whole conversation? There are people talking about, and Yuval Harari has been very voicey about these issues too, and I really respect his opinion and I like him. How are we going to define ourselves as humans in the future? And he called us organic beings, as opposed to inorganic beings
as
that are coming.
To the aliens that are really the machines.
Inorganic.
It is an alien thought.
Yeah.
We don't know how the machines think.
Yeah. So what is our role as educators, Dean? I mean, how can we not only deal with those things as a tool, but how do we prepare the future or the future generation to deal with this reality that we don't know how it is going to be unfolded?
That is a wonderful, wonderful point. And that is it. It's like the conversation, sadly, over climate change is not about saving the planet. And this is one of the fundamental biggest mistakes. It's regardless of whether it's caused by humans or not now is not the point. The point is what we need to train them is how will we coexist on a planet whose personality is changing?
Yeah.
And that's what it is. And that brings up a different conversation, and training our students to say, this will be the world you're going to live in.
Yeah.
How will you cope with those challenges? It's the same thing with AI. This is the world that is coming. Yeah. How you will coexist in that, how we train you to have developed the skills and the thought processes to deal with that. What that's going to be, we can't predict the future, but we can hopefully give you the skill sets to analyze this and analyze it and evaluate it accordingly and create something positive from it. Because we can't change the planet's the climate is changing. Regardless, it's not.
We have no control.
None whatsoever. We never did, and now it's in motion. How do we coexist with that? Are we ready to have that adult discussion?
Yeah. I think we are not.
Yeah, not yet, but hopefully if we can train that generation to think this way, to say, have that adult discussion.
But Dean, here's Adam, I'm not taking your role.
No, please.
Yeah.
You can go right ahead.
Yeah. Here's my question to you. When you look at the pachydermic elephants that we have, as I mean, with all due respect.
I like elephants too. Yeah, exactly.
You know, these institutions that exist here, and then they like these are God. I'm a PhD, by the way. These, you know, the gods of knowledge, and then the futurists, and all of these conversations, and the administration, the flexibility that we are in a like the speed of light transformation in terms of technology. The response has been so mediocre in academia and institutions and us as educators that is concerning me, because we are becoming less and less relevant to this conversation. Soon enough, why would anyone hire us or our students to be in their industry if artificial intelligence would be doing this role? So I see that we are losing relevance as higher education institutions or education institutions in general. What can we do about it? Because, I mean, these mega thinkers up in the floors of decision-making process, we talked about this before, you know, how things are being unfolded. I mean, how can we transform this conversation, making it much more practical?
We have to take a step back and say, what's our purpose and what value are we adding to society? And I think we need to have that frank conversation we haven't had the courage to have yet. And I think that that's a big part of it, is we need to have that conversation. If post-secondary is going to exist, if our professors are going to exist, and we need your PhD brains, both of you, we need this. This is an important, if we're going to solve these problems, we need all these perspectives and all these disciplines to come together and say, how do we examine this from all different angles? But we're not doing that. We're still on autopilot.
I agree. But Dean, me and Adam and all the PhDs are being used as not as a brain power. We're being used as hand power, especially by the college system. And this is a problem that we have.
This is because we don't take a step back and say, what's our purpose? We're happy to sell you the paper, but we don't honor the paper we sell you.
Yeah.
Like I said, we've turned into a business of sales.
Yeah.
I've got professors that have 4 graduate degrees and they're going for a 5th. And I'm going, and what's that going to get you in terms of what you want to do next? And they look at me and say, what? It's, it's another tool in your toolbox, but to what end?
Yeah.
And we do this en route because we've been conditioned to do it, rather than step back and say, what tools do I need? I think if most of us stood back and looked at our formal education and say, did it prepare me at all to stand in front of a classroom? A great analogy is we all go into our classrooms and say, we're going to break you into teams. And then my question is, are you going to start before you put them into teams, talking about Tuckman's 5 stages of team development? Are you going to talk about conflict resolution? Are you going to talk about FIRO? Are you going to talk about Schultz? I mean, where are you going? And they look at me with, well, you've never been trained in it. And yet, you know, and you're very bright, et cetera, et cetera. But until we do this, again, we have to re-examine what is our role? How do I prepare you to collaborate so when you leave here, we talk about diversity, we talk about collaboration. We don't teach it.
No.
And I think that's where we have to step back, and this comes back again to AI. We have to step back and say, how do we go about it? What is our purpose?
Perfect. Yeah. Agreed. We are agreeing.
So what are some answers here? What is our purpose in this regard when it comes to artificial intelligence in our education systems and using them in our industrial habits and requirements? Like, what is our value?
Well, the value, I think, should be always human-centered. Whatever we do, our focus should be always humans. And sometimes we understand why the industry is looking on optimization, and there are some theorists in administration or management that they're saying, well, optimization of outcomes is not the only thing. We need to look at human centricity and see long-term, have long-term plan. So humans need to be the focus and the center of everything we do. And in disruptive times, we need to bring disruption to our higher education system. I don't see that happening. I mean, we're still doing the same thing as the Priscus era. We were when 200, 400 years. I mean, there are examples in higher education that we use. It says our grandpas come to our classes nowadays and see the teacher in front of the class is listening to teacher. Maybe the environment is different. It's not beneath a tree, but it's in a classroom. They want the process for them will look quite just similar. I mean, we used to do this in the past. Now we have technology, we have all of these things evolving. and we have the brains of our children's different from the brains that we were. I mean, this is natural evolution. We can't blame it on anybody. We didn't change anything. We're still doing exactly the same way. Where is disruption? I don't know, but we are regulated industry. We need to talk to the ministry. Then we're funded by the ministry to perhead it. I mean, I don't know how is this going to be in the light of what's happening. And I see the transformation happening in the industry. I see the transformation happening in society. I don't see enough transformation happening in higher education or education system.
Yeah. Because that transformation can happen in the higher education system, even in a regulated environment, right? Because there are, things that can happen. There are methods of evaluation that can say, did these students learn these skills? There are still ways to test. There are still ways to evaluate in terms of outcomes, right? It's just the willingness of administrations and decision makers to challenge the old metrics of what particular skills we might be looking for. Because, I mean, it wasn't that big a deal as computer technology arose in general for computer science departments to expand and teach more people about how computers worked. And in fact, I think that kind of thing is more necessary now because there are so many nice, easy to use interfaces that hide the underlying architecture of our software systems. There's always one thing I always think of where I think of the generation gap in my own life, where my first computer was a DOS operating system. So I could see, yes,
Mine
I
was
know.
not even that one. I mean, mine is like just, I don't want it.
I know. I find it very nice to feel like the young person in the room for the first time. Thank you. My pandemic grades have come in very nicely. But that's just it. I knew, and I was probably among one of the last generations of people to know from everyday use what some of that underlying software architecture was, right? So in a world where so much of the user interface is optimized for easy use and we don't see what goes on underneath, what can education systems do in terms of what they are teaching and what they are explaining to teach people not just how to use the systems, but how they work and what their limitations actually are? Because if I see one thing that's in common among many of these different mistakes and the things that I find very funny about people's mistakes in using AI are when they use them and they don't know enough about the mechanisms underneath to know what they need to look out for in terms of how do I adjust this final product so that it does what I want it to do, right? We mistake what the AI produces for the end product, like you said earlier, Dean, because we don't think about what is the inner mechanism and what are the limitations of that inner mechanism. So, like, what could we do in terms of, even in the ossified system, even let's say, even with the departmentalized classroom-centric system that we have, what can we do in terms of teaching people about these systems that will improve their ability to use them because they'll know more of what's happening underneath the metaphorical hood?
That's a really good point, and I think it's about the transparency with that, and I don't think we do enough of that. I think we make the assumption it's there. I use the analogy in class all the time that technology is a wonderful tool, but can also make you stupider. All right. I watch people walking down the street looking at their phones instead of looking at the street map. They can't read a map anymore. We use calculators and we actually forget how to
1 + 1 or just a calculator.
Exactly. What's 14% of a million? And they go, wait a minute, give me. I said, no. If you don't, how will you know if it's right or wrong when you don't? So when I use those simple analogies, they smile and say, oh, I get what you mean. When was the last time you remembered a phone number? When I grew up, I remembered 200 phone numbers, and I still remember the phone numbers when I was. Yes, we had phones then, Adam. Yes.
Yes, I've seen those. I've seen those before.
Yeah, it was a dial. No, it was. But we did have them. But today, and when you bring this into context this way, I find a lot of the young learners go, I didn't think about it that way. To your point about DOS, yeah, maybe I should understand how this works, so that I understand how to fix it. Part of what we're doing is teaching them how to create an income stream for themselves to survive in a world going forward. how will they do that? And I think we've lost that focus. We're looking at bright, shiny things and saying, use these without understanding what the bright, shiny thing is and do we even need it?
Yeah. Because one of the things that I think is, again, it's where those really funny stories about misapplied AI come from. People don't know what the proper application of these tools are because we don't know enough about how they work underneath the hood. I mean,
They don't know.
yeah.
Nobody knows.
They don't know how it works.
Because the basic idea of how the technology works, as far as I understand it, is as an incredibly powerful correlation engine, and being able to assemble texts, assemble material, assemble a lot of the fundamental structures of stuff based on correlating huge numbers of data and figuring out what are the common patterns that seem to be most sensible for what my users want from me, based on all of these different data that I can track. And you're looking at me saying, I'm onto something, but there's more. What is that more?
The idea is just talking of control. I mean, many authors have expressed, I mean, voiced their concern about what we don't know on beneath the surface about these algorithms. And goes back to your point, Dean, transparency. We don't know, number one. Number two, the fear is that we do not have control over them. Because we're talking about a technology that emulates the learning that our brain, the way we were, machine learning is just, imitating how the brain works and optimized.
Except a million times faster
Yeah,
than we can.
and access to the zillions of information and databases. So we don't have control. We don't control the outcomes. What come out of these learning that data, we have no, and this is the main issue that has been raised. I mean, until we step back, look at this and say, okay, what do we want to do with this, and where we need to come with this, and where we need to go with this. It's too soon to think about these things. I mean, I know that societies are mobilized, government are talking, scientists are discussing. And we are in the higher education system, or education system, we are lost in between all of these conversations. We don't know what to do. We are trying to come to our classes and do our best, at the best of our abilities to do it, and to help our students to learn and use these tools. I'm using artificial intelligence in my class. I'm using ChatGPT as a starting point for critical thinking. I have a couple of AI assistants in my class that will tell the students what the tasks of the days are, and then summarizing at the end of the day what they were supposed to learn. And then I have the bot in my class. But this is me. Did the system ask me to do? No, I'm trying to make it. I'm not sure if this is the best way to do it. And I'm getting the feedback from my students to say, well, do you like it? Do you enjoy this? I mean, all the feedback system. I don't know where am I going with this. I have no idea how the system, because I have 1 or 2 or 3, 4 classes. How do I integrate this learning with the interdisciplinary things that are happening across the degrees or the diplomas or whatever the learning system is that we're at? I'm not sure how can we make this better, but
By doing more of what you're doing, because you're leading by example and you're doing. And this is a huge part of what isn't happening out there. The rest of it's a vacuum. So to your compliments to you, because you're doing it all right, as far as I'm concerned, because you're actually walking them through what's going on. So it's a living lab experiment, and they're thinking their way through. We don't give them answers. We're helping them formulate the questions.
Yeah, this is exactly what we're doing.
And that's what we need to do. And that's maybe the best thing public education or post-secondary can do, is teach them how to come up with the right question.
But Dean, here's my question to you. I invested $2,000 in these technologies. Does any faculty around me have, and I have the tech savvy side of life. So I'm an engineer myself, I code, I have this ability. What about the other faculty that have no?
Without a doubt, yeah. They back to our point of how do they drive this thing? Do they even understand what to do with it?
Yeah. I, of course, will not be naming any names in terms of who knows how to drive it and who does not.
No names. No names are going to be. No, promise.
No.
You sure?
I'm not naming anybody. I don't.
Yeah. Okay.
I know.
But the fact that you're doing, this is the biggest problem we have today, is there aren't a lot of doers in the class. Either they don't have the courage for it, or frankly, they may not know how.
Yeah.
And so I applaud you for doing that, because that really does make a difference. I know you do it in your classes.
A little bit. Not as much as you.
But I'm an engineer. Take it with a grain of salt. I mean,
True.
So I'm very enthusiastic about technology and the use of technology, impact of technology in society. So I have been doing this for a long time. But the question is loveology, love, and the human centricity element of it. And this is my concern, because when we use artificial intelligence and we say that we want to adapt our students to what the market is looking for, at the same time, I feel guilty because I am feeling that I am also at the same time taking from them this critical thinking cognitive element that would make them better thinkers than they are supposed to be. I'm not sure about what the answer to this question is, and it requires a lot of research, Dean. But at the same, I'm very much concerned about the hacking that Yuval Harari mentions to our language system by making our students or the outcome of the education process totally dependent on technology, eliminating the thought or deep thought process that we used to have, I think, on our generation. Not sure if we have it, but
There was an attempt anyway.
Yeah.
Definitely. I agree with you. And it's, again, we have to teach them how to ask the questions. And sometimes that's even teaching us how to ask the right questions. And understanding we're not here to come up with answers. Climate change is real, for example. And how will we mitigate this and coexist on the planet? Where are the positive opportunities? Not doomsday. There's enough doomsday out there to scare everybody. It's, we've got choices and we all want to move forward. So there's the positive analysis of it with no rose-tinted glasses. I think we take the same approach to AI. Whether we like it or not, it's there. It's ubiquitous and it's moving forward, and we don't know where it's going yet. Question is, how will we need to work with it so we're not afraid of it. We need to understand it.
Yeah. Even if we are heading towards potential doomsdays in our scenarios, there's nothing to be gained from simply sitting back in awe at the inevitable doom. The point is to experiment and figure out how to move through a period of doomsday with some kind of continuity intact, right? And at some point, I want to get in here to talk about this idea. More folks who have gone through in their lives or in their appearances, like real problematic, borderline or actual genocide kinds of experiences in their culture. See, how do you get through this? What is your memory of this? And how do you survive and thrive through this very potentially difficult period, right? Because it's very easy to come up with fears about what artificial intelligence will do when you don't know exactly what its powers are or what it can be, because that also includes whether it will be misused and how it will be misused as well.
And make no mistake, AI is being misused, will be misused, but will be used for good too. I see where the potential of AI making revolution in many different fields. The issue here is that how do we make sure that we have an ethical framework that we all agree upon, and it is, let's say, not regulated because I don't like regulations, but we have a social contract on what to do, what we cannot do, because what is happening now, as it happened with social media, we let it go, and now we are collecting, we are harvesting, the seeds that we planted without much of responsibility on those who developed the social media, to the extent that we were convinced that it's a great democratization of information tool, and then we woke up, it's a major tool of control and rewiring brains and making us more stupid and fake reality and all those things. But it had its positive element. We needed a strong ethical framework to survive this, let's say, doomsday that people are predicting in the future. I hope it never happens, because I still believe deeply in our humane capacity to adapt to what's coming and our superiority as inventors of this technology. And we need to resuscitate something that I believe has been lost since some time so far, and that's love. and people may find it like very cliche, but I feel with the development of technology, we became so individualistic in individualistic societies, and now collectivistic societies too. In Brazil, for example, I'm Brazilian, as you know. In Brazil, we used to be much more relating to each other and having this social life and supporting each other. Brazil is becoming so deeply individualistic. Hatred has been there. I've never, like, it's so disgusting. So loveology, I call it, the love, bringing this element, love in others, and paying attention to humanity and looking at this, social transformation and the weather changing around us and things are happening. Hatred is being nurtured in a way that has never been before, and the consequences are being catastrophic. I stand in my class and every day, and I tell my students, using my Brazilian way of delivering these things, that I love them. I have Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Christians, from all religions. And believe me, I'll love them the same way. And I do this because I want them to know that I love them, because trust has been lost. And when we show interest and love towards others, I guess, whether in classroom or whether when we talk about community and the outcomes of what's coming from all stakeholders, climate change will not be an issue. We will adapt in an easy way as we still focus on, and not like putting materialistic things on everything else. And this is our role as educators. I mean, teach people how to love again, because I feel that this thing has disappeared. It's off AI because AI does not know how to love. But I mean, this is what makes us different from AI: our empathy, our loveology, the way, like, our capacity of loving others and giving and sacrificing on for others. And this is AI would never maybe in the next 100 years would do for us.
That's a sense of purpose. I like that a lot. And maybe that's a reason to keep some post-secondary education around, to develop that sense of marketplace and community.
There you go.
Right? That we need each other to do this collectively together. And as you say, without judgment.
Yeah, of course.
And that is really necessary. And that's showing the downsides. And that's what's really important. I like what you said. Yeah.
That's true. And I think that might be a very, very good way to end this episode. So this has been the latest episode of the New Intelligence Podcast. And I want to thank Youssef, Dean Boukydis, for coming by. Thanks again. And thanks to my crew. Thanks to the good folks at CIMMO. Youssef, would you like to tell the good folks at the podcast briefly what CIMMO is, what it is all about, and remind me again of the precise details of that acronym?
CIMMO is the Chartered Institute of Marketing Management of Ontario. It is the only institute that has a charter. Actually, it was created by private law from the General Assembly of Ontario with its Parliament in 1988. Received the royal consent in May 1988, and it was dormant for a long time. And as a professor and caring for what marketing is, where marketing is heading, social media, all of those data and the problems that we have an huge ethical issue. So I decided to take over rebuild the business model with a couple of colleagues that are helping. And Humber actually has played, the Faculty of Business has played a major role in supporting us. And so we have accreditation, we have credentials. I mean, we have ethical code. We are working on building a better world or making the world a better place through marketing, not despite of marketing, and trying to help the new generation of marketers to get it right, to do it right, as the way we're talking about here. How do we handle technology and deal with technology in a way and serve society and stakeholders and so on. So CIMMO has been relaunched in 2016. It is a startup, not-for-profit organization, as you know. It is hard because we are all volunteer-based, and but we are here to help and helping to educate society and company. We're not going to fight. It's not the issue. I mean, we want to collaborate just to make the world a better place, not peacefully loving others, not fighting others.
It's incredibly forward-thinking, and we need more of that. And yeah, definitely. It's a fabulous idea.
Very good. So thank you very much. So that is all of us to thank right now. There will be other times. We will thank many of our other sponsors as well shortly after this is finished up. I want to thank you, the viewer and listener, for bothering to pay attention to us for as long as you have, and thanks again. You can listen to us anytime you want on our YouTube channels. There are clips of previous episodes for you to have a look at. There will be more content coming all the time as we produce it. And you can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify, the audio version of the show. You can find us on Podbean as well. That is one of our main homes too. And we have a variety of social media accounts that we will be promoting and mentioning all over those main channels again. And if you really want to, you can find us on LinkedIn at 25th Century Magazine. There, just an easy search away. So 25th Century on YouTube, 25th Century on Spotify, and The New Intelligence is the name of the podcast you've been listening to for the last 75 or so minutes, and thank you all very much for being here. 25th Century Magazine and 25th Century Magazine's podcast would not exist without our wonderful sponsors, and those sponsors include Juicebox Group Marketing, as well as TSK Wealth Planners, Preemptor AI, and CIMMO, the Chartered Institute of Marketing Management of Ontario. Thank you very much to all our sponsors for all your support and the various ways that you give that support. Thank you all very much. Juicebox, TSK, Preemptor, and CIMMO. You can also download or watch any podcast of 25th Century Magazine at all your favorite podcast venues. Most specifically, we are on Podbean, we are on Spotify, and you can even watch our ugly faces at the 25th Century Magazine YouTube channel. You can go to YouTube, go to Podbean, go to Spotify, and search 25th Century Magazine. You will find us, I would say, immediately. While there, you can watch the latest episodes. If you're into it, you can catch up on some of our back episodes and see some of the great conversations we have already had with a lot of interesting people about visions for the future that are a better world for all of us than certainly the one we're currently experiencing right now. And a better future for all of us here. So thank you to all of our sponsors. Thank you to all of our venues and our listeners. Remember, we are on Podbean, we are on Spotify, and we are on YouTube. You can search us there at 25th Century Magazine or 25th Century Podcast. Thank you.